The crowd went silent as a nervous Filipino man stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage, clutching an old worn-out guitar. He looked nothing like Elvis Presley, but when he started to sing, people froze. His voice carried the same soul, the same heartbreak, the same magic that once moved millions. For a moment, it felt as if Elvis himself had returned. But what no one knew was the story behind that song and the father who taught him how to sing it. In a cramped apartment in the heart of Manila, where the air was thick with the scent of street food and the hum of tricycles below, Rafael Cruz grew up believing that dreams could fit inside small spaces. The walls were thin, the paint cracked, and the nights were often hot and restless, but every evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, one sound made everything else fade away. Elvis Presley's voice drifting from an old radio on the shelf. His father, Arturo Cruz, a tired janitor with calloused hands and a gentle heart, would come home from long shifts, dust off his uniform, and sit by the radio. He'd close his eyes as Can't Help Falling in Love played, humming softly. Rafael would sit beside him, resting his small head on his father's arm. That was their ritual, no matter how poor they were. No matter how exhausted life made them, music always found a way in. "Son," Arturo would whisper, tapping his chest, "this is what real music feels like. Not from here," he'd point to the throat, "but from here." And then he'd press Rafael's little hand against his heart. By the time Rafael was 10, he had memorized every Elvis song his father owned. They'd sing together, using a broom as a microphone and laughter as their audience. Sometimes, neighbors gathered by the door just to listen. They said Rafael's voice carried warmth like the boy was born to sing about love, loss, and everything in between. But when his mother left, and later, when Arturo's health began to fail, the songs became something deeper. Music wasn't just sound anymore, it was survival. On nights when Arturo coughed too hard to sing, Rafael would take over, softly serenading him to sleep. The boy's voice filled the room like a prayer. One rainy evening, the radio broke. Arturo handed Rafael his old, cracked guitar, the one he had saved up for years to buy from a pawn shop. "It's yours now," he said weakly. "One day, you'll play this for the world." Rafael smiled through tears, not realizing it would be one of the last nights he'd hear his father's voice. Arturo passed away 2 weeks later, leaving behind nothing but that guitar, a few Elvis records, and a promise that echoed louder than any song. "Sing for those who can't, my son." After the funeral, Rafael sat alone in the dark apartment, strumming the strings that no longer stayed in tune. His fingers trembled, but his voice didn't. "Wise men say," he sang, quietly, eyes glistening. For the first time, he understood what his father meant. Music wasn't about fame or applause. It was about love, about keeping someone's soul alive through sound. And that night, under the dim glow of a flickering bulb, Rafael made a vow. One day, he would sing on a stage big enough for the world to hear. Not for glory, not for money, but so his father could finally listen from above and smile. Years passed, but Rafael never let go of his father's dream. He carried it across oceans, packed inside a worn guitar case and guarded deep within his heart. When he arrived in Los Angeles, the city felt enormous, shimmering with promise and loneliness all at once. Towering buildings replaced the crowded alleys of Manila, and the English signs made him feel like a stranger in a world that moved too fast. He rented a small room behind a Filipino grocery store, sharing the space with 2 other dreamers, one an aspiring nurse, the other a mechanic. By day, Rafael worked as a waiter at a downtown diner. By night, he sang quietly to himself, just loud enough for the stars outside his window to hear. Sometimes, he performed for his coworkers after closing time, balancing his guitar on an overturned bucket while they cleaned tables. They'd clap, laugh, and tease him. "Rafa, one day you'll be on America's Got Talent, bro." He'd smile politely, but inside, doubt gnawed at him. Would they ever accept someone like me? He wasn't tall or flashy. His accent was thick, and his confidence thinner still. But every time he thought of quitting music, he remembered his father's voice. "Sing for those who can't." One night, after a particularly long shift, Rafael sat in the empty diner, mopping the floor in silence. The TV mounted on the wall was playing an old episode of America's Got Talent. The crowd roared as a young singer hit her final note and burst into tears of joy. The judges stood. The golden confetti rained down. Rafael froze, mop in hand, staring at the screen. He could almost hear his father whisper, "That could be you." The next day, while checking his phone during a short break, an ad popped up. "Auditions open now for America's Got Talent. Submit your video." His hands trembled as he clicked the link. The words blurred in his vision. His heart raced. That night, he went home, pulled out his old guitar, the same one his father had given him, and opened the case. The scent of aged wood filled the room. He hadn't played it in months, but as he lifted the lid, something fell out, a small, folded piece of paper he hadn't noticed before. He unfolded it carefully. In faded ink, written in his father's handwriting, were the words, "For my son, ever stop singing. Your voice will take my dreams where my feet couldn't." Tears welled in his eyes. That note wasn't just paper, it was permission. He set up his phone on a stack of books and hit record. His fingers shook, But when he strummed the first chord of Can't Help Falling in Love, his voice carried something pure: grief, love, memory, and faith, all woven into one sound. When he finished, he uploaded the video before he could change his mind. A simple click but to Raphael, it felt like touching the stars. As he closed his laptop, he whispered to the photo of his father on the shelf, "Papa, if I get this chance, I'll sing for you." And somewhere, between Manila and Los Angeles, between heaven and earth, his father's dream began to stir again. The day of the audition arrived like a heartbeat Raphael couldn't quiet. As he stood backstage at the America's Got Talent Theater, surrounded by contestants with glittering costumes and perfect smiles, he felt painfully ordinary. His hands trembled as he clutched his old guitar, the same one that had traveled from a Manila apartment to this grand stage in Los Angeles. Its wood was chipped, its strings slightly worn, but to him, it held the voice of his father and the weight of a promise. He peeked through the curtain, and his breath caught. The auditorium stretched endlessly, rows of seats filled with thousands of faces, their eyes bright with expectation. The iconic AGT logo glowed in the background, and under the blinding lights stood the judges: Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Heidi Klum, and Howie Mandel. They looked larger than life, almost unreal. A staff member tapped his shoulder. "You're up next." Raphael swallowed hard. His pulse thudded in his ears as he stepped forward, his shoes echoing across the polished floor. The lights hit his face, sharp and hot, and for a brief second, he froze. The crowd quieted. Cameras pointed at him from every angle. His voice trembled as he introduced himself. "My name is Rafael Cruz. I'm from the Philippines." Simon leaned forward. "What will you be singing today?" Raphael gripped the neck of his guitar tighter. "A song my father loved," he said softly. "Can't Help Falling in Love" by Elvis Presley. A murmur rippled through the audience. It was a bold choice. He took a deep breath, strummed the first chord, and began. At first, his voice was small, fragile, uncertain, but as the melody unfolded, something shifted. His eyes closed, and the memory of his father's laughter, their nights of singing together, and the echo of that old Manila apartment filled his soul. His voice deepened, rich and trembling with emotion. The words didn't just leave his mouth, they carried his father's love, his loss, and the weight of every sacrifice that brought him there. Wise men say, only fools rush in. By the second verse, you could hear the quiet sniffles in the crowd. Even the camera crew stood still, lost in the moment. His tone wasn't an imitation, it was reincarnation. It was as if Elvis's soul had found its way back through a man from halfway across the world. When Raphael reached the final line, "But I can't help falling in love with you," his voice cracked not from nerves, but from love. He let the last note linger, hanging in the air like a prayer. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the theater erupted. The audience leaped to their feet, clapping, cheering, crying. Simon Cowell, usually composed, blinked in disbelief before saying quietly into his mic, "That didn't just sound like Elvis. It felt like him." Raphael smiled through tears. "My father taught me that music comes from the heart," he said. "Tonight, I just wanted him to hear me wherever he is." And in that single moment, as lights glimmered like stars around him, Raphael Cruz, once a waiter, once a boy with a broken radio, became a bridge between the past and the present. The son of a janitor had brought the king back to life. For a few seconds after Raphael's final note faded, the entire theater hung in stunned silence. Even the cameras stopped panning, as if afraid to break the spell that lingered in the air. Then, from the center row, a single audience member stood up, clapping slowly, reverently. Another followed, then another, and within moments, the entire auditorium was on its feet. The roar of applause crashed over Raphael like a wave. People were crying, cheering, shouting his name. Some held their hands to their hearts. Others simply stared in disbelief. For them, it wasn't just a performance, it was an awakening. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, eyes wide, a faint, astonished smile tugging at his lips. "Raphael," he said into the microphone, his voice unusually soft, "I've been doing this show for many years, and I've never seen anything quite like that. It's like Elvis Presley never left us, but came back as a Filipino." The crowd exploded again, louder than before. Raphael pressed a trembling hand to his chest, overwhelmed. His eyes glistened as he looked up toward the ceiling lights, whispering so quietly only he could hear it, "That was for you, Papa." Heidi Klum wiped a tear and smiled warmly. "You didn't just sing, Raphael," she said. "You made us feel every word. That's something even the best artists struggle to do." Howie Mandel nodded. "When you started, I expected an impersonation, but what you gave us was something real. It wasn't Elvis's voice, we heard it was his soul, reborn through yours." Raphael's lips trembled. He leaned into the mic, his voice cracking as he spoke. "When I was a kid in Manila, my father used to play Elvis on a broken radio every night after work. We didn't have much, but music made us feel rich. Before he passed, he told me, 'Sing for those who can't.' Tonight, I think he finally heard me." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The judges exchanged glances, moved, speechless. Simon, known for his stoic demeanor, looked down for a moment, blinking hard. Then he smiled again, and with a rare sincerity, said, That was perfect. Sofia Vergara clapped her hands, turning to the audience. Who wants to see Raphael in the next round? The crowd erupted once more, chanting his name in rhythm. Raphael, Raphael. And then came the sound, the magical one. The golden buzzer. Golden confetti burst into the air, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Raphael dropped to his knees, his hands covering his face as the stage turned into a shower of gold. The judges stood, clapping. The audience screamed, some waving tiny Philippine flags that had appeared from the crowd, through tears. Raphael lifted his head, golden flakes sticking to his skin. In that glittering moment, he wasn't just a contestant, he was a son fulfilling a promise. A voice carrying a legacy, a bridge between worlds. As he walked off the stage, still dazed, he whispered again, "We did it, Papa," in somewhere, in the quiet corners of the universe. It felt like a father's applause echoed back. The next morning, Raphael woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing, nonstop. Notifications flooded his screen, thousands of messages, comments, and shares. His performance had gone viral overnight. Clips of his soulful rendition were spreading across every social platform with headlines like the rebirth of Elvis Presley and the Filipino voice that brought the king back. But Raphael didn't feel like a celebrity. He sat quietly on the edge of his bed, still holding the guitar that had carried him through the storm. His reflection in the mirror looked the same, humble, tired, human. Yet, something deep inside had changed. For the first time, he didn't feel invisible. Over the next few weeks, offers poured in: TV interviews, recording contracts, sponsorships. He was invited to perform on talk shows, and fans from around the world sent messages telling him how his song reminded them of their fathers, their lost loved ones, or their own forgotten dreams. One woman wrote, "When you sang, I felt my dad beside me again. Thank you for healing something I didn't know was broken." Those words touched him more than any applause. He realized his father had been right. Music wasn't about fame. It was about connection. It could mend hearts, bridge worlds, and remind people that love never really dies. So, instead of chasing fortune, Raphael made a different choice. He flew back to Manila. The city welcomed him with open arms. His story had reached home before he did. News outlets followed him as he walked through the narrow streets of his old neighborhood, waving shyly at the same neighbors who used to listen by his door when he sang as a boy. He found the tiny apartment still standing, the paint more faded, the air still warm and familiar. He placed his father's guitar in the corner and whispered, "We did it, Papa, we really did." With the money he'd earned, Raphael opened a small music school in the community. Its walls were painted with bright murals of instruments, notes, and faces of children singing with joy. He called it the Arturo Cruz School of Music, in honor of his father. There were no expensive fees, no auditions, only open doors for anyone who wanted to learn. Soon, laughter and music filled the air again. Young voices sang Elvis songs, pop ballads, gospel hymns, anything that carried emotion. Raphael taught them what his father had taught him. Don't sing to impress. Sing to express. Don't sing from your mouth. Sing from your heart. One afternoon, as the sun dipped over Manila, Raphael stood outside the school, watching a group of children perform Can't Help Falling in Love. Their voices were raw, imperfect, beautiful. Tears welled in his eyes. In that moment, he understood. His dream had never been about bringing Elvis back. It had been about bringing love, kindness, and music back into the world. And as he looked to the sky, golden light spilling over the city, he smiled softly and said, "The music lives on, Papa, through them, and through me,